Are you enjoying the course? I hope so. There's one more week to go. In this final week, you will learn about phrasal verbs and collocations. You'll find out what those are and why they're tricky. Then you'll end with a review of all of the lessons on tricky grammar. You'll be amazed at how much you've learned in this course. And as usual, you'll have lots of exercises to do for added practice. I hope you enjoyed these last few lessons.
Welcome to Phrasal Verbs Review. Phrasal verbs are combinations of a verb and an adverb, like break away, or a verb plus a preposition, like turn on. Here are some other types of phrasal verbs. Some phrasal verbs may include three parts. In this lesson, we'll look at phrasal verbs in two parts. Part 1, types of phrasal verbs, and Part 2, problems with phrasal verbs. There are different types of phrasal verbs: transitive and intransitive, and separable and inseparable. First, let's review what transitive and intransitive means when talking about verbs. It means that after the verb comes the adverb and preposition, what goes with the specific verb, and then the direct object, meaning the who or what receiving the action. The direct object must be included with transitive phrasal verbs. Trans means to cross, so the action of the verb, adverb, or preposition combination needs to cross into a person or thing. But with intransitive phrasal verbs, no direct object is needed. So let's look at some examples of both transitive and object is needed. So let's look at some examples of both transitive and intransitive verbs. The teacher called on the sleeping student. The sleeping student is the direct object. The police are looking into the crime. The crime is the direct object. With intransitive, we often eat out, however, does not have a direct object. He was too tired to get up, also doesn't need a direct object. Be careful. Some phrasal verbs can be transitive and intransitive, but with different meanings. For instance, look up as a transitive verb can mean check a dictionary for a word, as in Stan looks up the new word. Or look up can be intransitive and can mean improve, as in Maria lost her job, but now things are looking up. Here are some other examples of transitive phrasal verbs. And some examples of intransitive phrasal verbs. Check a Good Learner's Dictionary online or in a book to find out if a phrasal verb is transitive or intransitive if you aren't sure. Some phrasal verbs can be separated by the direct object and some cannot. Instead, the direct object separates the verb and adverb or preposition. These are called separable verbs. But only transitive verbs can be separable or inseparable since transitive verbs need direct objects. For example, blow up can mean explode like a bomb or in anger. The army blew up the mine, where the mine is the direct object after the verb blew, and adverb up. Or we can say the army blew the mine up, where now the direct object separates the verb and adverb. Call off means to cancel an event, as in the manager called off the meeting, or the manager called the meeting off. Pick out means to choose or select. We can use either sentence like Janet picked out her wedding dress or Janet picked her wedding dress out. With these sentences, we can replace the direct object with a pronoun. In these sentences, we use it. When we use a pronoun, we must separate the verb from the adverb or preposition if the phrasal verb is separable. With really long direct objects, separable phrasal verbs should stay with their adverb or preposition. For instance, Margot turned down a job because it didn't pay enough money. A job is the direct object and very short. Now let's look at the sentence, Margot turned down a job that offered her half of her current salary. That offered her half of her current salary describes a job and makes the object very long. It's easier to keep the verb turned and adverb down together as a group. But with inseparable verbs, The verb and adverb or preposition cannot be separated from each other. They must go together without interruption. For example, come by means to find by accident, as in the sentence, Walt came by a $100 bill. But we cannot say, Walt came a $100 bill by. Live on means to support oneself. For instance, some people live on very little, but we can't use some people live very little on. Take after means to look like or resemble someone else. We could use the sentence, George takes after his mother, but not George takes his mother after. Welcome to part 2 of phrasal verbs. In this lesson, we will focus on problems with phrasal verbs. But what makes using phrasal verbs so troublesome? Well, there are a few things that can make phrasal verbs difficult. One reason is the transitive and intransitive confusion, which goes with the separable and inseparable uses. But phrasal verbs are also hard because they have multiple meanings and are very idiomatic. Remember from the review lesson, transitive means a verb and adverb or preposition need to be followed by a direct object. Intransitive means you don't need a direct object. And in fact, this is an error if you add a direct object. For example, for transitive verbs, we can say the teacher called on the sleeping student and the police are looking into the crime. And some examples with intransitive verbs include we often eat out and he was too tired to get up. It's important with transitive phrasal verbs you have the direct object. Not having a direct object is a mistake you need to avoid with phrasal verbs. With intransitive phrasal verbs, for example, we often eat out, and he was too tired to get up. If we add a direct object to these types of verbs, that's a mistake. If you are not sure about which verb is transitive or intransitive, check a good learner's dictionary. These will include notes about transitive or intransitive status of phrasal verbs. Good learner dictionaries will include notes about separable or inseparable status. Inseparable in this example. In fact, some dictionaries will only state separable or inseparable, and you need to remember only transitive phrasal verbs can be separable or inseparable. Separable means that the adverb or preposition can be followed by the direct object, or the direct object can be after the verb and before the adverb or preposition. So in the example of blow up, It is a separable phrasal verb and can be used in a few ways. The army blew up the mine, the army blew the mine up, or the army blew it up. It is better when using pronouns to always separate. And some phrasal verbs must be separated. They follow three patterns. The first is verb plus direct object plus adverb, like to ask someone back, meaning to invite someone to return for a visit. Or to have something on, meaning to wear clothing. Another pattern is verb plus direct object plus preposition plus the object to go with the preposition. For example, leaving someone for something, meaning abandon someone for a reason, and run something by someone, meaning share an idea with someone. The third pattern is verb plus direct object plus adverb plus preposition, and lastly, another direct object. So we end up with a long expression like make it up to someone, meaning you make a mistake and promise to fix it. Or pass something off as something else, meaning to say something fake, like a purse, is real. Here are some sample sentences with our separable phrasal verb patterns. We asked back the professor who lectured about global warming. He ran a new design by his boss for her approval. Since he missed her birthday, he made it up to her by taking her for a weekend to San Francisco.